Hi, everyone. This is our NORP project for county level pollution, health, and socioeconomic data integration for nonprofit research. I'm Misha Zuhair.
And I'm Ashish Penchamurthy. So, for motivation, our current nonprofit face increasing challenges identifying where environmental health and socioeconomic risks overlap. And while some agencies like the EPA, CDC, and the IRS publish valuable data to help counteract this data is often inconsistent and is also difficult to use at a large scale on the county level, where community needs are most actionable. Our project aims to bridge this gap by integrating pollution, health, income, poverty, and migration datasets to help nonprofits target high-risk counties with data-driven insights for intervention and resource allocation.
So the current limitations of the NORP datasets within Metabase, most of the studies focus on national or census tract level. However, they lack county level integration needed for specifically targeted community action. So, for example, pollution, migration, health, and poverty datasets are published by different agencies like the EPA and IRS, but they're difficult to cross-analyze because of the lack of identifying variables. So limited research actually connects pollution exposure to both health outcomes and population movement together, which motivates our project to integrating new data sets within the NORP database because a lot of them don't share commonplace identifiers such as FIPS code for US counties and states for scaling analysis, which makes it difficult to merge and analyze consistently at a county level. And there's also a limitation in time period of the data sets on NERP currently, as they focus only on current date instead of a period of data available to analyze trends, such as going back a decade, for example.
The datasets we integrated are 36 files, and these datasets are county-level US data, which is compiled into six main categories. Air pollution, which we got from the EPA, and we have these datasets from 2015 to 2025. The AQI dataset has max and or median AQI, also with healthy and unhealthy days, and pollutant concentrations, which are PM 2.5, ozone, and other monitor substances. Then we also have the IRS migration from 2015 to 2022, which shows the inflow to outflow households, and also the net migration, which is the inflow minus the outflow to show the total migration within a certain county. We also have the socioeconomic indicators from the USDA ERS, which shows the poverty rate and then median household income in 2022. We also have health outcomes from the CDC places, which shows the county level rates of asthma, COPD, stroke, diabetes, and other mental and physical health analyses. And then we also added to enrich the NORP's existing health related data for future references.
So the next step after we refined and completed our dataset collection was to integrate and clean the data. So we had some pre-planned filtering in order to remove the irrelevant rows and columns given our large dataset sizes. Many of these datasets had a very large number of rows and columns, so we needed to carefully extract only the parameters that were required for our analyses. In order to clean our datasets, we used Python and specifically the pandas library to remove null and empty values and special characters, and also standardize the county identifiers of FIPS across the data sets for more cohesive analysis at the county level. We also ensured consistent formatting for year ranges and county names. These prepared clean data sets were ready for SQL integration onto the NORP metabase after removing all of these undesired parameters and only keeping the columns that are required for our analyses. So this is an example of some of our cleaning scripts. On the left, you can see the AQI data. So this is a Python script that only keeps the relevant columns such as state, county, the year, of course, and good days, unhealthy days, and max and median AQI. There are other columns within this data set that were unneeded. So we wanted to keep only the ones that would be useful for numerical analysis. And we used pandas for this. And for the right screenshot is another example of cleaning a median income data set for socioeconomic data. So for this one, we had to do some cleaning in the row order specifically. So for example, a lot of these had a couple different parameters besides median household income. So we wanted to clean it up in order to only include the rows that had the type of data of median household income of 2022.
Yeah, so and then for the Metabase integration, we had to set up a create tables where we created tables for our existing data sets to integrate them into the Metabase. And here you can see the variables we used and the names that we used along with the character types. So for example, in the create tables, county FIPS is claimed as a varchar, and this is because the initial digit, which might be a 0, is very important in identifying where a certain county exists within the state level, also in the county level. We also have the table names here, which are the table names that are being used right now in the Metabase if we were to access this data. And at the bottom, we have an example of our schemas. So the IRS migration schema, our poverty rate schema, and our AQI schema, which you can see a lot of them, or most of them, have FIPS codes with the same variable names to allow for seamless integration.
So this is an example of our data sets in Metabase. As you can see, after cleaning the data sets, we integrated the AQI data sets for 2015 through 2025. This is a small example of 2015 through 2023. And as you can see on the bottom as well, we have the Places County Health for 2024, which includes the county FIPS and the health outcomes that we wanted to kind of analyze, such as the asthma previous, the COPD, as well as the year that the Places County Health is displaying. So these are the data sets that we are working off of to conduct our analyses, which we're going to go over the SQL queries for that in a bit. This is another example of our database. So this is the air quality concentration for 2015. In our particular case, we cleaned it so that we would display parameters such as ozone and PM 2.5, as those seem to be the most relevant measures for air pollution. And this was measured over either 24 hours for PM 2.5 or 8 hours for the sample duration for ozone. And this displays a couple different values, such as the arithmetic mean for the PM 2.5 and the max values, so that we can properly get the pollution rates within specific counties. And those are organized by their county FIPS, as you can see on the leftmost column.
For the analysis approach, the integrated AQI, pollutant, socioeconomic, health, and migration datasets into Metabase. And to integrate these, we began with stages to highlight the key topic and category, followed by SQL queries and visualizations. The analysis was divided into 5 components. Pollution, which identified the cause between the PM 2.5 and AQI exposure to see which counties had a high indication of both. Then we looked into socioeconomic vulnerability, which is income and poverty alignment with pollution. After that, we looked into the health impacts, which is chronic health outcomes relative to pollution. Then we looked at migration response, which compares both the net outflow and inflow versus pollution rates in a certain county. Then finally, we compiled all of these together and to make an analysis called the Environmental Risk Index, which is a priority metric for nonprofits that highlights counties facing the highest environmental, health, and economic burdens. For this calculation, we had certain weights attributed to each of the traits. For example, 45% was given to PM 2.5 concentration, as this is the actual indicator that we are using for pollution. We gave 30% to median AQI, as AQI is a standard air quality index measurement, which showcases the overall health of the air in the current area. We gave 15% to poverty percentage to identify socioeconomic factors that might help or hurt a community in fighting pollution. And finally, we put 10% towards COPD, which is pulmonary disease, which is a indicator of a disease for lung, and it shows the prevalence of health factors that may have been caused by pollution.
So more on the analysis approach. Before we began with our SQL query analysis, we needed to reconcile with some of the differences in the data sets. So for example, we needed county level alignment using FIPS codes. As you may have seen in the previous slides, most of the data sets already had a FIPS code consolidated column. However, the AQI itself lacked a county FIPS. So we needed to standardize that. And the main issue that we faced were that the year ranges varied widely. So for example, AQI and concentrations were 2015 through 2025. However, income was solely the year 2022, poverty the year 2023, CDC places 2020 to 2024, and IRS migration spanning 2015 to 2022. So to standardize this, we normalized state and county fields for AQI plus migration when we were conducting SQL query analysis relating to those factors, and also enforced a consistent 5 digits FIP formatting within our data sets and considering taking that into consideration in our SQL queries, as well as matching migration year ranges to the nearest AQI year. So for example, IRS migration would a data set for IRS migration would be displayed in a range of like 2015 to 2016. So we would consolidate that 2015 to 2016 year range to a year range relating to the AQI. So 2015 to 2016 would be analyzed along with an AQI data set from 2015. And the outcome of these standardizations and consolidations that we had were ensuring that the SQL queries ran consistently and produced organized, comparable results across all of the data sets. In addition, we had the income and the poverty. Although those were only 2 years, we used them as essentially a baseline measurement for recent socioeconomic conditions.
Here we have the pollution severity and exposure trends from 2015 to 2025. The first line chart we have compares the average PM 2.5 concentration versus the average median AQI over the following 10 years from 2015 to 2025. And this data is acclimated over taking the averages of every county for each year. And here you can analyze the trend as you can see a slight increase for the PM 2.5 in 2025, along with a stable median AQI throughout the decade. On the right side, you can see that there are three US map heat maps, and these are to identify which states specifically have the highest AQI, pollution, and unhealthy days, respectively, to identify states that might have each of these or might have a higher average median AQI, pollution, and unhealthy days together. And on the bottom left, we have the AQI versus PM 2.5 pollution scattered plot. And this plot identifies counties that have both a high concentration for pollution as well as median AQI. And the trend line here is set to be at an AQI of 50 because anything above 50 could be referenced as being unhealthy for sensitive groups.
The next analysis we covered was income and poverty trends compared with pollution. So as you can see, we have two scatter plots on the right. The first one covering median income versus the PM25 concentration. As you can see, most of the median income in the 60,000 to 80,000 area have a clustered PM25 concentration that could be considered relatively moderate. However, you can see on the right that the higher income, median income areas also face a similar level of PM25. In addition, we see the scatter plot of median income versus AQI, in which we have the same baseline healthy AQI line of 50, which of anything above 50 could be considered unhealthy for sensitive groups. And as you can see here, a lot of the median income that are concentrated on the left between 60 to 80,000, which could be seen as relatively low in most communities, have a somewhat show a trend of somewhat high average median AQI above the 50 line. And then on the right, we can see a mostly summarized poverty percentage with the measured against the AM average PM 22.5. So as you can see in the areas where poverty percentage is at a moderately high rate, so 12 to 18%, you can identify some spikes in the average PM 2.5 within those poverty sets, which could indicate a slight correlation with poverty percentage and high PM 2.5.
Our next analysis is the community health outcomes trend versus pollution exposure. On the left side, you can see there are four scatter plots of four indicators of chronic disease and health indicators or health outcomes compared to the PM 2.5 pollution level. And you can see a slight trend of the scatter plot showing that a higher PM 2.5 has a small correlative effect towards both asthma, COPD, along with poor physical health and poor mental health. And on the right side is a pie chart of the top 100 top 100 counties that have a PM 2.5 in the year of 2023, and it shows a percentage of these counties that have both a low pollution rate and a low health risk, along with a low pollution rate and a high health risk, and a high pollution rate and a high health risk, and a high pollution rate and a low health risk, seeing that the percentage of these communities or counties could help other nonprofits to organize and identify which counties would need help in both of these aspects.
So now we have the migration trends versus environmental factors. As you can see, we have an AQI versus net migration table that is normalized. This was conducted using a SQL query that used a formula that normalized the median AQI along with the net migration and percent unhealthy with different weights. So for example, median AQI was multiplied by 2 because this is the most weighted factor in determining the health of the air, and then net migration, since this is a very large number, this would be divided by 1,000 because you have people migrating within the tens of thousands, and percent unhealthy multiplied by 100 to give a more standardized factorization for these percentages. Now, as you can see here, we have some high medium AQIs that are correlated with high net migrations. So the net migration is calculated as inflow minus outflow. Therefore, a negative net migration would indicate more people moving out of a region, and nonprofits could use both this table and this map to identify certain regions that are experiencing consistent outflow and that are correlated with median AQI and percentage of unhealthy days. So the map below, for example, you can see states such as California and New York, they're highlighted as kind of a lighter red, meaning more people are moving out of those areas versus states like Nevada and Arizona, darker red. So more people are moving into those areas. Therefore, they may need less of an emphasis for intervention from nonprofits.
Our final analysis is the Environmental Risk Index, the ERI, which identifies vulnerable counties for nonprofit intervention. At the top left, we have a bar chart which lists the top 75 counties that have an ERI index. And below, you can also see the FIPS codes. And from the FIPS codes, you can identify that a lot of these states, or a lot of these codes come from different states, showing that there is an ERI index value that is even amongst most states and not just specific to Nevada and California, but actionable across the United States. To the top right side, you can see that there is a ERI index heat map, which identifies which states have the most ERI indexed counties. And these are the average values across the state. And so for states that have a lot of nonprofit actions like California or Texas or Maine, for example, if they were to outreach to other states, they could look into this index or heat map and see which states have a problem in terms of risk factor. And at the bottom, we have an ERI top 100 counties table, which can also further explain or help nonprofits identify which counties would need intervention.
Overall, after conducting the analyses and looking at our visualizations, we came to a couple of different results based on our set parameters. So persistent pollution exposure was identified as PM 2.5 levels remained steady from 2015 to 2025, with AQI fluctuations showing peak unhealthy years. There's also a bit of an uneven environmental burden. So certain regions such as California, New Mexico, and Texas showed a consistently higher PM 2.5 and AQI, as well as unhealthy days. In addition, there were a couple of different socioeconomic vulnerability patterns identified, such as many counties experiencing both low median income and elevated pollution, which may indicate that these areas would need stronger support from nonprofits, and those nonprofits could intervene there. In addition, we had health risks also linked to pollution, so increased COPD, asthma, and poor physical mental health rates associated with PM 2.5. And of course, population shifts under the environmental stress from air pollution, where we have the counties and states showing negative net migration coupled with potential higher pollution. And then lastly, we have the highest risk counties that were identifiable via the ERI that we composed, where pollution, poverty, and chronic disease overlapped, which would help us guide nonprofits towards priority intervention zones. And some of these highest ERI counties we identified in the last visualization were Maripoca County, Kern County, San Bernardino, Tulare, and Fresno.